So the as many of you know, the communication function classification system was birthed here at Michigan State as part of my postdoc with Nigel. And so what we were thinking about is the fact that it published in 2011. So it's now been out 10 years. So, so the title is CFCS 10 years later. And so here's the original publication that was in developmental medicine and child neurology. And we had, I don't even remember if I counted, but you know, nearly 100 people involved in the original development of the CFCS. And this website lists those that gave us permission to give their names. I'd say many of you are familiar with the CFCS. The idea behind it was that the gross motor function classification system, the GMFCS, had been out since '97 about how you could classify functional mobility from level 1 being most functional to level 5 being least functional. And so, so we used a similar protocol to try to create something similar with the CFCS. And it's 4 pages. First page gives definition, second page says what it's not, and gives this list of communication methods. Start my timer. The third page shows the 5 levels, from level 1 being most functional, that you can communicate with anybody in real time in all your environments, down to level 5, where you're seldom effective sending and receiving messages, even with familiar partners. And I think lots of people like our little flow chart to think about it. And I'm happy to talk more and more about the CFCS if you desire. So it's been translated into 26 languages thus far. We never dreamed back when we started this. Nigel was my mentor, and that it would catch on so well. And it's now being used even beyond cerebral palsy. I'm not sure why my slides are so weird today. So in 10 years since the CFCS publication, what does literature say? So we had a search strategy. We looked for cited reference searches, and we reviewed papers for the use of the CFCS, participants' disabilities, reliability and validity research, how it's being used as participant description, and near and dear to my heart, the reporting of communication methods, especially using augmentative and alternative communication. So 369 articles, according to Web of Science, have cited the CFCS in the 10 years since it was published. And 150 of those articles were, it was just mentioned in the background at some way. And then 6% of the articles had a commentary, probably about communication primarily, and the CFCS was mentioned in it. And then 53% of the articles actually reported it within a research project. And it has been most widely adopted in cerebral palsy, not a big surprise, but it's also being used in some of the speech, language, hearing, communication disorders, even without an underlying diagnosis of cerebral palsy. 41 of the articles describe reliability and validity of the CFCS. And this is for Ed Hurwitz, that we've got this percentage of thousands and thousands of people who have been rated. And what Ed has always said to me, and I still can't do this yet, is what are the functional profiles if we have GMFCS, MAX, and CFCS, and what would be the percentages of the 125 combinations thereof of the, so I'm still trying to figure that out for you, Ed, but we don't have it yet. I'm hoping, since now some of the cerebral palsy registers in Europe and in Australia have added the CFCS, that we may get to that point that we can actually, and they almost all have GMFCS and MAX in there. So we might eventually get to seeing how many of the 125 combinations of gross motor, manual ability, and communication classification levels are actually populated.
I hate to ruin the presentation. I just wanted to comment that these numbers are participants in studies, right?
Yes.
So they reflect highly toward people that can communicate. It's not like a population.
These are not population based, but I may pull out the ones, are a few in from some of the cerebral palsy studies from the registers. And I might pull that out as a secondary analysis to pull out those that are looking at that and compare that percentage with what the overall numbers are.
I could have experienced with the level 5 higher.
Yeah, yeah.
This in the OWL study, array the GMFC.
Yes, so our second paper in 2012 was looking at the GMFCS, the MAX, and the CFCS, trying to populate all the 125 boxes.
It was too small a sample.
Yeah, we didn't have, I don't remember how many was in the OWL study, 200?
220 something.
Yeah, so we didn't have a really good way to look at that. We need the bigger population based, I think, to see that. Okay, and this is when I'm very sad as a speech language pathologist that only 26 of the 195 articles describe communication methods, which would include both spoken language as well as using any kind of picture displays or speech generating devices or all of that. So this is an ongoing challenge to get more recognition of this. So I think the upside is we've been amazed at how many, at the uptake of the CFCS, and traditionally as part of a classification family, including gross motor and manual ability. And now some people are adding in the eating and drinking ability classification system. All are 5 levels, from level 1 being most functional to level 5 being least functional. But as I said, although research studies are reporting CFCS levels, and so now we at least have a consistent common data element in a lot more studies than we've ever had before, we still are limited by not knowing how many of the individuals with cerebral palsy are using augmentative and alternative communication. So next steps is to see what does the epidemiology look like, especially I'm hoping in the areas where we've got the European registers, the Australian registries that are using CFCS. And does limited reporting of augmentative and alternative communication mean that AAC intervention is not being offered to all individuals with cerebral palsy who might need that? The best countries in the registries that are actually looking at AAC are the Scandinavian countries, so Norway, Sweden, Finland, and they're reporting that even in their areas where they're looking at it, they still just don't get people access to AAC that could potentially benefit from it. So I have lots and lots of people helping, and that's my quick overview of 10 years of the CFCS.